Hello, my name is Megan Varner, and I am a health and energy coach and physical therapist helping individuals with POTS and chronic fatigue rebuild their energy so that they can thrive again in their lives. I'm very passionate about helping this group of people as I myself am one of them and have been on the journey navigating POTS and chronic fatigue along with a connective tissue disorder called Ehlers-Danlos syndrome over the last decade myself. And I'm happy to say that step by step, I was able to rebuild my energy and get back to doing what I love, helping others rebuild their energy themselves. So this video is a great topic as we approach Christmas 1 week from today. We're going to be talking about how to protect your energy when you are in the presence of others. Oftentimes we don't realize how much being around other individuals in our lives can be draining. And this was actually one of the last few things I realized I needed to work on in my own journey. It's not to say that you shouldn't be around people, but it can be very helpful to understand the impact of being in a relationship with another person. And by that, I mean not just a spouse or your friends or your family, but also really anyone you come into contact with, whether it be a medical provider or a store clerk, or the person that changes your oil. The people that we are around can directly impact our energy because they can directly impact the state of our nervous system. And for those of us that have POTS, chronic fatigue, or other forms of chronic illness, our nervous system can tend to already be leaning towards an energy draining state. You might be wondering what I mean by this. Well, if you think about your nervous system like a pool, our nervous system can either kind of be pushing us into the deep end where we're treading water, trying not to drown and using up a lot of energy, or we can be in the shallow end where our feet are on the bottom or at least closer to the bottom and we're able to rest and relax or be in an alert and a coherent state where we're not feeling like our energy is so drained. So one of the first steps when you are interacting with somebody is to recognize what state that your own nervous system is in. And you might be thinking, well, if I'm already in this draining state or tend to be in this draining state, what's the point? Well, sometimes we're not, and it's also kind of recognizing to what degree that we may be in this draining state, because then we can know how to shift ourselves out of it or what we need to do in that moment interacting with that individual to reduce the amount of energy depletion or energy drain that we could potentially have while being around them. So if you're in that sympathetic fight or flight state, common symptoms are, yes, a high heart rate, feeling flushed, feeling tense, feeling like there's a knot in your stomach or butterflies in your stomach, your heart is racing, your chest is pounding, feeling like you're agitated or shaky or you just need to move. We might begin to feel angry or frustrated or even panicked if we're in that state. This state isn't all bad. Sometimes it's good to be there to really mobilize our energy. But understanding that we're in that state, and especially if we're in a state where someone else is also in that state, it can be very helpful to understand that we need to do something to help shift ourselves out of that state. I'll talk about that in a second. Also recognizing, are we in the other energy depleting state where we're in a state of dorsal vagal shutdown? That's referencing the polyvagal theory a bit, but it's actually a parasympathetic state, but it's a state in which we feel very depleted, that heavy, overwhelmed state where we may feel numb or trapped. We may feel like we really just can't move and we're frozen. Certain feelings like feeling hopeless or sad or shameful or just feeling like there's no point in trying, that can be a sign that we're stuck in that particular state. And just like the sympathetic fight or flight state, if we're with someone else that's also in that state, it can further bring us down and deplete and drain our energy quite a bit more. So once you recognize what state you're in and potentially kind of feeling what the state the other person is in, you can have an idea of what you need to do to step out of that. Thinking about what to do in advance can be super helpful, because a lot of times when we're in one of those two energy draining states, it can be tough to know what to do, because we're either so overly aroused in that fight or flight, or so shut down in that dorsal vagal freeze response, it's tough to tap into it. So kind of practicing or having a plan of action can be super helpful. And this is something that I walk step by step through with many of my clients, because it can be something that takes a lot of practice to implement. But I thought I'd share a couple ideas now. So if you either write out on a piece of paper or maybe make a phone note and say, when I feel X, I'm going to do Y. For example, when I feel a high heart rate, tense, and angry in the presence of another individual, I am going to excuse myself for a few moments and take 5 deep breaths. Now, you could make that to be whatever you want, but oftentimes we need to get rid of some of that energy or have some way to shift that nervous energy into more of a calm energy state. And as many of my videos mention, I'm a huge fan of breath work. There's all different types you can do, but in this particular state, I do like to suggest doing something where you tap into belly breathing, because that can really turn on your vagus nerve. Your vagus nerve is very much a ruler in a lot of these states, and being able to engage your ventral vagus can really help you if you're in that more aroused state. So, in the other side, what happens if you're in a shutdown or frozen state? Well, doing something where you start to introduce a little bit of gentle movement or a breathing practice can be helpful in this state as well, because it is a gentle movement of your belly, using your diaphragm muscle, or just doing some somatic practices or havening techniques. I oftentimes just like to tap into some very gentle tapping on my hand, or EFT. That can also be very effective to ground yourself and bring yourself back into the present. So the goal in either one of these states, to explain a little bit more, is to try to bring yourself out of that fight or flight, or bring yourself out of that shutdown or freeze into a state where we're more calm, we feel connected, we feel open, engaged, we're more mindful of what's going on in that moment. And there can be a variety of ways to get yourself there. The key is knowing how to get there before you get stuck in a situation with another individual that may be pulling you down further. So, one of the other big pieces of learning how to master what the state of your nervous system when you're in the presence of others is knowing how to set boundaries and advocate for what you need. So setting boundaries can look different for each one of us, but especially if we have been in the presence of someone before and we know that they tend to shift us into one of these energy draining states, setting some time limits as to how long you're with them, or setting maybe even some kind guidance of topics so that you're not pulled down quite as much. Or having a plan of action, like what I just mentioned, that if you start feeling like you're shifting into one of the states, you know to tap into your breathing, or you know you need to excuse yourself to shift your nervous system out of that energy draining direction that it is going in. And another big boundary that I do like to bring up is you can say no. That might sound kind of odd, especially as we approach the holidays, but if you are feeling overwhelmed or shut down, or if you are feeling like you're in that fight or flight frenzied state, it is okay to say no, to take some time out to help get your nervous system back into regulation. And you can also, if you're going into a gathering, just to mention, you can ask for some things that you need that may be helpful in that particular environment to feel better. For instance, if you know that you're going to be triggered into that more fight or flight state, figuring out ways where you can lower your heart rate, have more breaks, stay hydrated, have some sit breaks, elevate your feet, can actually be really helpful for those of us with POTS. And also being mindful of what we eat as well, as that can kind of trigger that fight-flight state with the body reacting. So I hope some of these tips were helpful as you head into the holidays, and especially as you just interact with people year round. Realize that it is super powerful to understand how to tap into what state that your nervous system is in and know how to shift it back into that calm, collected, regulated state. And don't feel defeated. It can definitely take some practice. If you're interested in learning more about how to rewire your nervous system and become more regulated, so that you can rebuild your energy and thrive with POTS and chronic fatigue, I'd be happy to talk to you. Drop a comment below this video or send me an email at megan.varner@guidetoresilience.com.